Imagine finding out the person you thought you knew better than anyone was keeping something from you. A secret so dark, it could unravel everything you believed in. Jennifer Elizabeth von Hausen was one of those people who lit up every room she entered. People described her as bright, loving, and full of potential. Her friends saw her as a constant source of strength, always ready to offer a smile or a helping hand. But in the months before her life was tragically cut short, there were whispers. Small, quiet things that hinted at a life Jennifer kept hidden. No one could have guessed that behind the perfect picture of her life, there was a story filled with deception and violence. Jennifer's life, from the outside, seemed flawless. She was an educated, independent woman with a promising future ahead. Yet, no one could have imagined that everything she worked for would come crashing down in the most brutal of ways. It all started with a relationship that seemed perfect to those around her. But as the days went on, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. And what was once seen as a fairy tale began to unravel into something unthinkable. How could someone so full of life, so full of promise, end up the victim of a crime that no one saw coming? Stay with me as we explore the haunting case of Jennifer von Hausen, a case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the people you trust the most. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated with all our gripping true crime stories. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Jennifer was more than just a name to those who knew her. She was a force whose presence made an undeniable impact, whether through her kind words or the way she carried herself with genuine warmth. Born and raised in Kansas and Missouri, Jennifer's early life was grounded in a family who valued kindness, hard work, and dedication. Her parents were pillars of her world, always supporting her through every milestone. From a young age, it was clear Jennifer had a bright future ahead of her. She excelled in her studies and showed an early interest in science, which would later guide her to a successful career. After high school, Jennifer pursued higher education with a drive that would become a hallmark of her personality. She studied chemical engineering, determined to carve out a career that would not only challenge her, but also allow her to make a difference. It was during her time at university that she met Beau Rothwell. Their connection was immediate, a shared love for academics, adventure, and a deep understanding of one another. What started as a friendship quickly blossomed into something more. Beau admired Jennifer's ambition, her heart, and her intelligence. To him, she was everything. Someone who made the world feel just a little bit brighter. Their relationship became the talk of their circles, and in 2015, Jennifer and Beau took the next step, tying the knot in a ceremony that was described as nothing short of beautiful. Friends and family watched with joy as they started their journey together, believing it was the beginning of a happy and fulfilling life. But like many couples, their love story was not without its challenges. For years, Jennifer and Beau struggled with fertility issues, a painful and private struggle that Jennifer confided in only a few. It weighed heavily on her, but she remained hopeful. And then, in 2019, the news they had longed to hear arrived. Jennifer was pregnant. It was a moment of pure joy, a victory after years of uncertainty. Jennifer's world seemed perfect. She was finally on the path she had always dreamed of: a loving marriage, a growing family, and a successful career as a process engineer at DuPont, where she was respected and admired for her expertise and hard work. Jennifer's life was starting to fall into place, the future looking brighter than ever. Yet, beneath the surface, things were changing in ways no one could have predicted. Her bond with Beau had always seemed solid, their life together harmonious. But there was something different about the way he started behaving as Jennifer's pregnancy advanced. It wasn't obvious at first, just a few small signs, a shift in mood here, a reluctance to engage in family gatherings there. Nothing to suggest the storm that was brewing just under the surface. And as Jennifer prepared for the arrival of their child, everything seemed poised for a happy ending. Little did she know, the happiness she had so desperately hoped for was about to be shattered, forever altering the course of her life and the lives of those who loved her. On November 11, 2019, Jennifer Elizabeth von Hausen was last seen at her home. It was an ordinary morning, nothing that would foreshadow the tragedy about to unfold. She kissed Beau goodbye as she left for work, a simple exchange between two people who had shared so many years together. But when Jennifer didn't return that evening, something didn't feel right. At first, Bo was confused, thinking she might have been held up at work, or perhaps stopped by to visit a friend. But as the hours passed, the reality began to set in. Jennifer wasn't answering her phone. He called her repeatedly, left messages, hoping for a response that never came. Still, he waited, pacing around the house, unsure of what to do. It wasn't until the following morning, when Bo found himself unable to get in touch with Jennifer, that his panic escalated. His worry turned to desperation as he called the authorities. He reported her missing, explaining how she had disappeared without a trace. At first, the police treated the case as any other missing persons investigation. Yet, as they delved deeper, cracks began to form in Bo's story. A few days later, a breakthrough in the case came when Jennifer's car was discovered abandoned in a quiet parking lot on the outskirts of town. It wasn't far from her home, but there was no sign of her. Inside the car, her phone was found, but there was no trace of Jennifer. This was the first sign that something wasn't adding up. Jennifer wasn't the type to just leave her phone behind. It was unlike her to go anywhere without it, much less abandon it in such a way. As the police investigation gained momentum, the search efforts intensified. They canvassed the area, conducted interviews with friends and family, and pieced together Jennifer's last known movements. But amidst the investigation, it was Bo's behavior that began to raise red flags. He seemed distant, disoriented at times, and yet oddly composed in others. His emotions didn't match the gravity of the situation. And then, there was the discovery that would change everything: the search of Bo's home. In the days following Jennifer's disappearance, police officers combed through the house. What they found shocked them. In the garage, cleaning supplies, bleach, industrial strength cleaners, and various chemicals were neatly arranged, almost as if they had been placed with purpose. But it wasn't just the supplies that stood out. There were stains, dark, suspicious stains, on the floor, remnants of something that didn't quite belong. The evidence was unwinding. It raised an unsettling question. Could Bo have been hiding something? The discovery of these items, along with the mounting inconsistencies in his story, shifted the investigation's focus squarely onto Bo. Was he truly as concerned as he claimed to be? Or had something else happened that night? Something so horrifying that it left a trail of evidence that couldn't be ignored? This was the moment when the case began to take a sharp turn, and all eyes turned to Bo Rothwell. The questions were only beginning, and the truth, it seemed, was far from what anyone had imagined. As the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance continued, the police began to focus more intensely on Bo. His behavior was raising questions, and soon, it became clear that his actions were far from what you would expect from someone whose partner had gone missing. Bo refused to allow police to search their home. His decision to hire a lawyer almost immediately raised further suspicions. What was he trying to hide? Why would someone so concerned about their missing wife be so eager to put up barriers to the investigation? But the more the authorities dug into Bo's life, the more unsettling the details became. When they returned to the home, this time with a warrant, they discovered even more disturbing evidence. The smell of bleach hung in the air, a sharp and unmistakable stench. Bloodstains were found in various places, on the floor, on the walls, each one pointing towards something violent that had occurred in that home. But it wasn't just the stains that were telling. The walls had been damaged, as though someone had tried to clean up something far too quickly and haphazardly. It seemed as though Bo had been trying to cover up the evidence of a horrific event. Soon, the case took a significant shift. What had initially started as a missing person investigation was now being treated as a potential homicide. The police arrested Bo on suspicion of murder, though the full details were still unclear. The evidence was beginning to stack up, but there were still gaps to fill in. In the days that followed, the police uncovered crucial surveillance footage from a nearby store. The footage showed Bo in the hours leading up to Jennifer's disappearance, purchasing large quantities of cleaning supplies. The timing was suspicious. The fact that he had bought those items just a day before Jennifer's disappearance was a red flag. Why would he need so much bleach and cleaning equipment? Was he preparing for something? The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, and the authorities were now faced with a reality. Bo Rothwell, once thought to be a grieving husband, was now the prime suspect in his wife's murder. As the investigation deepened, It became increasingly clear that there was more to Bo than anyone had known. What hidden side of his life was he keeping from those around him? What other secrets had he been hiding, and how far was he willing to go to keep them concealed? As the investigation continued to unfold, it wasn't just the evidence at the scene that was speaking volumes. It was also what was found in Bo's personal messages. Behind the locked doors of his phone, investigators discovered a series of secret messages that would reveal a darker side to the man who once seemed so ordinary. These messages were between Bo and a woman who wasn't Jennifer. For months, Bo had been carrying on an affair. His texts with his mistress were full of longing, hidden desires, and discussions of a life apart from Jennifer. But it wasn't just the affair that weighed heavily on him. It was what he saw as his dilemma. Bo's messages painted a picture of a man who felt trapped in his marriage, unable to cope with the life he had built with Jennifer. As the affair continued, Jennifer's pregnancy added a whole new layer of complexity to the situation. In the midst of their relationship struggles, Bo found himself facing the reality that he was about to become a father. Jennifer, overjoyed at the news of her pregnancy, had no idea of the turmoil brewing within her husband. But Bo's feelings about the pregnancy weren't what anyone would expect. In some of his darkest messages, Bo expressed frustration, even regret, about the life he was being forced into. The texts reflected an indecision that bordered on desperation. He didn't want a child with Jennifer, and the thought of fatherhood seemed to push him further away. He felt trapped, as if the future he had imagined was slipping through his fingers. In these messages, Bo outlined his future, though it wasn't with Jennifer. He talked about scenarios where he could leave, start over, and leave behind the woman he had once pledged to love. In one particularly disturbing message, Bo spoke about a life with his mistress, imagining a fresh start without the burden of a child he didn't want. It's hard to know exactly when Bo crossed the line from a man overwhelmed by his circumstances to a man willing to do the unthinkable. But the emotional weight of the affair, coupled with the pregnancy, was starting to form a dangerous mixture. His desire for freedom clashed violently with the reality of his situation, and somewhere along the way, Jennifer became more of a burden than a partner. What was it, then, that finally triggered Bo to take that final step? Was it the guilt of his double life? The fear of the future he felt was closing in on him? Or was there something even more dangerous at play? Something buried deeper inside him that he was unable or unwilling to face? What do you think triggered Bo's actions? Was it guilt, fear, or something else? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Bo Rothwell later confessed, and his confession painted a picture of the events leading up to the murder of his pregnant wife, Jennifer Rothwell. He admitted on the stand that an argument about his extramarital affair spiraled out of control, leading him into what he described as a red haze of uncontrollable anger. In this frenzy, he struck Jennifer with a mallet, killing her in their Creve Coeur home. Despite his defense team's claims that the killing was not premeditated and an attempt to reduce the charge to voluntary manslaughter, the evidence told another story. Investigators uncovered a house drenched in efforts to cover up the crime. Blood-soaked carpet scrubbed with bleach and signs of a staged scene. Before her disappearance, Jennifer had searched online for guidance on how to handle a husband upset about her pregnancy. A haunting insight into her state of mind in the days leading to her death. 7 days had passed since Jennifer had vanished without a trace. Her family and friends were clinging to the hope that she would be found alive, but deep down, the fear began to take root. The police had scoured every corner, but there was still no sign of her. Then, in a remote area near Troy, Missouri, a breakthrough came. A discovery that shattered the fragile hope that remained. It was a local farmer who first stumbled upon the scene. What he thought was nothing more than debris in the field turned out to be something far more tragic. Hidden beneath a cluster of trees, Jennifer's body was found. The discovery was as shocking as it was horrifying. Jennifer's lifeless body was found discarded in the cold, an unceremonious end to the woman who had been so full of life. The authorities confirmed the identity through dental records, but it was something else that made the discovery even more devastating. Jennifer had been pregnant. Her unborn child, the little one she had carried so lovingly and excitedly, was also lost. It was a moment that left everyone who knew her heartbroken, including the detectives working on the case, who had been forced to confront the unimaginable. The news rippled through Jennifer's family like an earthquake. Her parents, who had once looked forward to their daughter's future, now had to process the brutal truth that they would never again hear her laugh, never again witness the joy she radiated. To lose Jennifer was one kind of grief, but to lose her child as well was an anguish that was impossible to put into words. Her family had to reconcile the joy they had once felt for the pregnancy with the sorrow they now faced. There was no closure, only an endless ache. Friends who had stood by Jennifer through thick and thin now found themselves questioning how someone they had trusted could be capable of such a monstrous act. It was an unfathomable pain that infected every corner of her world, turning her vibrant memory into one filled with grief and unanswered questions. The community, too, felt the sting. The woman who had touched so many lives was gone, her future stolen by a betrayal that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. Jennifer's death was a reminder of how fragile life is, how easily it can be snuffed out by a single moment of rage, fear, or indecision. As the discovery of Jennifer's body sent shockwaves through her family and the community, the case shifted gears. With Bo Rothwell now under suspicion, the emotional weight of the investigation would soon lead to the trial, where the truth would be laid bare for all to see. The legal battle was about to begin, and with it, the final chapter of Jennifer's tragic story. The courtroom was filled with tension as the trial of Bo Rothwell began. For Jennifer's family, it was another painful step toward closure, but nothing could ever truly undo the heartbreak they had endured. The prosecution wasted no time, laying out the evidence against Bo. Rothwell initially reported Jennifer missing on November 12, 2019, but detectives quickly zeroed in on him. Even before her body was found abandoned near Troy, Missouri, he faced charges of murder. At trial, the jury rejected his plea of passion-fueled manslaughter, convicting him of first-degree murder on April 28, 2022. In court, Bo addressed Jennifer's family, offering an apology. "Words cannot describe how sorry I am." But his remorse did little to ease the profound loss felt by her loved ones. Jennifer's mother, Robin von Hausen, described her daughter as a bright light who was taken far too soon, a devastating reminder of the life that Bo extinguished. Rothwell's conviction for murder, tampering with evidence, and abandonment of a corpse secured a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor Wesley Bell affirmed the outcome, stating, "This man who killed his pregnant wife will spend the rest of his life in prison. That is what we intended, and today confirms that justice has been served." The prosecution's case centered around a disturbing set of messages and actions that painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. They presented Bo's pros and cons list, an unthinkable document in which he weighed the potential benefits and consequences of leaving Jennifer. They revealed texts and emails exchanged between Bo and his mistress, messages that clearly expressed his desire to escape his marriage and start a new life. These weren't the words of someone who had been caught in a moment of passion. These were the calculations of a man who had been planning for a future without his wife, even if it meant eliminating the very life he had once promised to protect. The prosecution also pointed to Bo's behavior during the investigation. His refusal to cooperate with the police, his immediate hiring of a lawyer, and his odd demeanor suggested a man who was hiding something, and not just grief or shock. There was an arrogance to his responses, a coldness that only deepened the suspicion surrounding him. It seemed clear to the prosecution that Bo's actions had been carefully calculated. His inability to face the consequences of his actions led him to take Jennifer's life, and the life of their unborn child, in a calculated and brutal manner. But Bo's defense wasn't ready to surrender. The defense team argued that this was not a case of premeditated murder, but rather a crime of passion. They claimed that Bo had been overwhelmed by the stress of his affair, the weight of the pregnancy, and the uncertainty of his future. In the heat of a heated argument with Jennifer, they argued, Bo snapped. His actions were not the result of cold, calculated reasoning, but the unplanned eruption of a man pushed to his emotional limits. The defense painted Bo as a victim of his own guilt and shock. They argued that he never intended for things to escalate the way they did, that in a moment of regret and frustration, he acted impulsively, his emotions clouding his judgment. The defense's narrative sought to humanize Bo, to cast him not as a cold-blooded murderer, but as a man who made a terrible, irreversible mistake in the heat of the moment. As the trial moved toward its conclusion, the jury was left with the daunting task of deliberating on the case. The emotions in the room were palpable. Jennifer's family, still in shock, clung to the hope that justice would be served. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity, weighing the evidence, the testimonies, and the conflicting narratives presented by both sides. It was clear that the weight of the decision before them was not only a matter of law, but one of morality and justice. Finally, the jury reached a verdict. When the judge read the words "guilty of first-degree murder," it felt like a thunderclap in the courtroom. Jennifer's family gasped, relief and grief flooding their hearts simultaneously. While the verdict couldn't bring Jennifer back, it brought a sense of justice for her and her unborn child. Beau's fate was sealed in that moment. He would be sentenced for his actions, and there would be no escaping the truth of what he had done. The sentencing brought with it an emotional finality. Beau Rothwell was sentenced to life in prison, his future now forever shaped by his past actions. His remorse, if it existed at all, could not undo the horror he had caused. Jennifer's family left the courtroom with a heavy heart, their pain far from over, but the justice they had fought for had been delivered. For those who had followed the case, the trial was a reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal, deceit, and unaddressed emotions. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of life and how a single decision can shatter everything in its path. As we come to the end of Jennifer's story, we want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Beau's actions were the result of a crime of passion, or was this premeditated murder? Share your opinions in the comments below. As we reflect on Jennifer's life, we are reminded of how quickly things can change. She was more than just a victim in this tragedy. She was a bright, loving woman with a future ahead of her. A woman whose dreams were torn apart by the very person who was supposed to protect her. Beau, once her partner in life, became the man who ended it. The betrayal runs deep, a wound not only in Jennifer's life, but in the hearts of her family and friends who will never fully recover from the loss. This case serves as a reminder that hidden secrets, when left unchecked, can lead to unimaginable consequences. For Jennifer, the life she had worked so hard to build was stolen from her by the man who should have been her greatest support. And for Beau, the choices he made, the deceit he carried out, led him down a path of no return. In the end, his lies, his affair, and his decision to end Jennifer's life have forever changed the lives of everyone who loved her. The pain Jennifer's family faces is something that cannot be undone. The images of her bright smile, her love for life, and the joy she brought to others are now bittersweet memories. They have lost not only a daughter, a sister, and a friend, but also a future that was stolen from them in the most violent way imaginable. Her unborn child, too, taken from the world before it ever had a chance to grow. In the silence of their grief, Jennifer's family will carry on, forever marked by the betrayal of the person they least expected. This case is a tragic reminder that even the people closest to us may harbor dark secrets. We can never truly know what lies beneath the surface, and that can have devastating consequences for all involved. As we close the chapter on Jennifer's story, we urge you to remember her, to think about the lives we lead and the relationships we hold dear. Never take them for granted. And as we continue to uncover these stories, we can only hope that the lessons we learn from them will lead to a world where people like Jennifer don't have to suffer such a fate. If you found this story as haunting as we have, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest true crime cases. Don't forget to share this story with those you care about, and comment below to share your thoughts. What are your reflections on Jennifer's case? We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.